I have to apologize for the pothead question ahead of time, but you've been, let's talk about the metaverse broadly. You've been a big proponent of the idea of the metaverse. We'll talk more specifically what that means today, but we've been talking about simulating reality better and better and better. So the pothead question is, what does it take to simulate reality to the level we see around us today? How far away from that are we to simulate this ultra realistic, immersive, fun reality that Earth is? What does it take?
We're going to get shockingly close over the coming years, certainly less than 20 years. If you look at the progress, what areas where we have achieved total photorealism and what areas where we fall short, we're getting very close in all non-human interactions you see in the world, walking through a jungle or a city, all the lighting, it's very close, and that might be just a few years away, but then all of the problems that involve humans, human dialogue and intent, have a much, much, much higher bar that they need to meet to satisfy our brains and convince us that they're realistic and or real. And yeah, I think that's going to be the primary challenge of graphics development and simulation development over the coming decade.
So the realistic humans, that's going to be the bottom line. Yeah. So, and visual and behavior too. So everything.
Yeah, I was asked about this about 10 years ago, and I said that even if you gave us an infinite amount of computing power, we couldn't simulate realistic humans because we simply don't have the algorithms. We have no idea how to simulate human intelligence. And that was absolutely the case then, but it's not really true anymore. What we're seeing with generative text AI is not only at a level that you could say that it's actually doing a pretty good job of simulating human, at least at humans at the text level, not at the emotional level yet, but at least at the level of words spoken, and find more and more ways of training it on more and more scenarios that you might have a very, very compelling human simulation going on in the next 5 years even. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I think the arc of the technology is inextricably heading in that way, and it's heading at a shocking, shocking rate.
We don't say this enough, but the current state of LLMs, I mean, if you put Alan Turing in conversation with ChatGPT, I mean, it really passes the Turing test. Like almost definitively passes the Turing test. Of course, we keep raising the bar. Well, the Turing test is not a real test, it's not a useful test, whatever. We just keep raising the bar for AI, where it's always going to be lesser than. But yeah, you have increasingly ultra realistic faces and bodies combined with increasingly moving and powerful, full of emotion, speech, text. I work with this amazing company called 11 Labs that does text to speech well. There's companies that specialize in bringing text to life, right? That's going to increase. Different companies do that very well. And so and then all of a sudden you have this synthetically created scene where a human is speaking and you're moved to the point of tears because of the scene. Beautifully lit face in the full darkness, the emotion, the drama of the scene. Yeah, I think, so you're saying 5, 10 years, maybe 20.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely see it in our lifetimes.
Increasing the level of potheadness in my question, do you think we might live in a simulation? And if we do or don't, how hard would it be to build such a simulation where we're fully convinced we're in it?
Well, I don't think that these questions are necessarily unanswerable. I think I'd like to see more actual effort to ascertain what is the underlying mechanism of the universe. And I don't think we're here for no reason at all. I think the world's a pretty cool place, and the fact that we can exist and the laws of physics, and especially the standard model of physics, and all of the parameters that lead to these atoms and life evolving in the presence of thermodynamic gradients. That's really cool. And I think it's a worthy field to study more about that holistically. I don't know. The question of are we living in a simulation ourselves always boils down to, well, if we are living in a simulation, what are they living in? Because at some point there has to be some base reality.
Mhm.
Or, one of the philosophical theories that was put forth seriously was that there is no physical reality. If you have a system of equations, such as the laws of physics, then all possible evolutions of dynamical systems under those equations kind of have a physical reality. So we just are kind of a manifestation of laws of math rather than needing an actual universe around us.
Mhm.
I don't know. I like dabbling in that philosophy. And as we get CAI becoming smarter and smarter, and we get closer and closer to really capturing the full laws of physics, these questions become quite a lot more compelling.
You start to think if we're not living in a simulation, what are the things about this reality that are not simulatable? So, what are the big mysteries around us? It feels like the physics is simulatable. It feels like a lot of the incredible stuff that we talked about, while super nice, seems simulatable. But then there's the flame of consciousness, the feeling of it, whatever that is that lights up in our eyes as humans. Maybe that's not simulatable. Maybe that is the thing. Maybe that's a thread that connects to the explanation of the mechanism, as you said, of the universe. That's really important to understand, and we're completely clueless about that mechanism. I mean, a lot of the religious texts sneak up on what that mechanism is, but we're still mostly clueless. We only have these like leaps of faith in believing what that mechanism might be.
So, the whole idea of nested simulations, perhaps, you know, given sufficiently advanced technology, is kind of mooted, such that if you wanted to simulate another reality, you're kind of just actually creating the reality. You're doing quantum mechanical operations that would produce the same result anyway, and you're running them at full performance. So it's not really a nested simulation. It's just another thing that's happening in the universe.
Hmm.
So that would be interesting, but I think it's ultimately a theological question, and because it's no longer cool to deal with theology as part of science, there's not been much work on that. You can't publish results on those topics in a respected physics journal, so I think it's kind of been set aside. But it's interesting to note that the laws of quantum mechanics themselves have a place for, God or souls or whatever external source of input you might want to attach to such a thing, and that, you know, that there's this idea of quantum wave function collapse that when we, look at a quantum system evolving in perfect superposition of many possibilities and you go to observe it, you actually just see a specific possibility. In the multi-slit experiment, the light ultimately ends up being observed going through one slit or the other. And that's a place where there's this random number being injected into everything around us, trillions of trillions of trillions of times per second in everything we're observing. And if you want to attach some external input, well, there's a place.
Yeah, and it could be seriously accessible through the rigors of science, but we just know so little there.
Yeah, it's funny. And in that area, we know nothing more than cavemen knew whatsoever. We know the laws of quantum mechanics, and we have computers that may be soon more advanced than we are, but we just don't have any answers to the fundamental questions about life, the universe, and everything.
Do you think, sort of more practically, do you think we'll create video game worlds of the metaverse variety in which humans will want to stay? So, I mean, to me, this kind of discussion of a simulated reality, the real test of immersion is like not wanting to go back to the real world. As a perfectly healthy, excited, normal human being choosing to stay in that world, how hard is that, do you think?
Well, I think the technology is coming, and then there's a human question of should we go that far?
Should we?
Um,
Yeah,
certainly as a game developer ourselves, Epic doesn't aspire to that. We make fun games,
yeah.
and the ultimate manifestation that we found is fun games that people play together to have fun in between, work and the other things in their real lives. But as the simulations get more and more realistic and the capabilities become more and more real, I think we have to ask ourselves some hard questions about how should humanity operate in that space. What are the limits that we should go to, and what are the limits we should set?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be some hard questions, and I think maybe I'm just being human centric here, but there should probably be some legal bounds on two things. Sort of not creating a reality in which humans would want to stay too long. Sort of, yeah, focusing more on the game side. And more importantly, not creating simulations of humans that could suffer. To me, as we talked about, creating ultra realistic humans, eventually that means creating humans that can suffer, that can fall in love and experience heartbreak and loss, that can fear death. And the more you simulate that to the full reality of the human condition, the more you get to this place where you have a simulated humans that is able to suffer. And I think, legally speaking, I think you have to get to a place where that's not allowed. Like there is a line you can't cross, and that's a hard thing for humans to deal with. That's going to be some interesting Supreme Court cases. Once you create a human sufficiently realistic to where they can suffer, means that human could be tortured and do terrible things to that human. That's artificial, quote unquote. But boy, that still feels wrong. I don't know what that is, but it feels wrong to torture a simulated human. Now, when you play a video game and it's a shooter and everybody's having fun, that doesn't feel wrong. But there's a line, and that's going to be a fascinating line for the Supreme Court to explore. Oh man, what an exciting future we're living in, huh?
Yeah, I think the thing to appreciate is, like, game developers have just generally been on the good-spirited side of things. If you look at the worst things that people do in popular video games today, it's like, what, you rob a bank in GTA? But it's clearly fictional and all in fun and not serious and over the top. Yeah, I think, yeah, as things get more realistic, especially simulation of humans, yeah, there are some hard questions that will have to be answered there. But I think the thing that all game developers need to remember is we're here to make people's lives better by entertaining them, providing them with fun, and a diversion from other things, and being a part of their lives, and not trying to be too big or being too much, and not trying to provide an alternate route to reality, but to just provide a fun source of entertainment, like the many other things that people do for fun.